The ancient history of China is told almost exclusively from the perspective of the Han Chinese people, whose high culture dominated the Middle Kingdom's early dynastic history. However, this land has always been culturally diverse, especially in the subtropical lands south of the Yangtze. Long before the arrival of Chinese civilization, this mega-region was inhabited by a forgotten spectrum of non-Chinese seafarers, painted warriors, and jungle-dwelling animists. It is their story we will tell today. Welcome to our video on the Nanman and the Hundred Yue, the forgotten natives of southern China. Today's video is sponsored by our friends at Creative Assembly, who asked us to talk about Nanman culture. Their award-winning Total War Three Kingdoms strategy game is set in ancient China and combines a gripping turn-based campaign game of empire building, statecraft, and conquest with stunning real-time battles. And its first expansion pack, called the Furious Wild, includes the Nanman culture, making the game even richer and deeper. Furious Wild adds 4 new playable factions, each with their own unique mechanics, with 19 new factions overall populating southern China, and with them more than 25 new units, including formidable beasts. The Nanman get a unique tech tree tied to unique missions, and a completely new character progression style, with feats used to unlock traits. Visit the jungles around southern China, and with it, the fearsome tribes of the Nanman. Will you unite the tribes of the south? Will you do it using diplomacy or through warfare? Support our channel and learn more about the exciting expansion pack via our exclusive link in the description. Chinese culture began in the fertile basin of the Yellow River with the early dynasties of the Shang and Zhou, the originators of many pillars of Chinese culture. During this time, anyone who lived outside this cultural sphere was considered a barbarian. The Zhou designated 4 main groups. The Dongyi were the eastern barbarians, who lived around the Korean peninsula. The Shirong were the western barbarians, who lived around modern-day Gansu province and Tibet. The Baidi were the northern barbarians, predecessors of the nomads with whom China would do battle for millennia. Finally, south of the Yangtze River, in lands we now consider the heartland of modern China, dwelt the Nanman, literally southern barbarians. In time, they would also be called the Baiyue, meaning the 100 tribes of Yue. Inhabiting a vast territory stretching between modern-day Shanghai and central Vietnam, these so-called 100 tribes of the south had languages, customs, and religions considered utterly foreign to the Chinese of the Central Plain. The archaeological record shows that as early as the 5th millennium BC, the ancestors of the Baiyue peoples had already formed sedentary communities along the Yangtze and Pearl River deltas. They cultivated wet rice, raised water buffalo, and lived in distinctive houses balanced off the swampy ground on high stilt posts. Around 4,500 years later, during the spring and autumn period of Chinese history, the so-called southern barbarians had developed 2 powerful kingdoms, known to the Chinese as Wu and Yue. These 2 kingdoms were bitter rivals, but the Chinese states to their north considered them equally foreign and culturally indistinguishable. In 482 BC, the state of Yue launched a successful military campaign against Wu, conquering its longtime rival and consolidating itself into a huge kingdom that marked the political zenith of southern barbarian power. Meanwhile, other powerful confederations of Yue tribes existed outside of this realm, such as the Luoya and Oya, known also as the O-Viet and Lac Viet. In case you're wondering, no, the title Viet is not a coincidence, and we will get to that in a moment. For now, let us try to present a coherent picture of the Baiyue culture and lifestyle. Granted, this is an inherently problematic endeavor. This is because there are little to no records written by the peoples in question which survive to this day. This makes us reliant on the outside perspective of ancient Chinese chroniclers, who used the exonym Hundred Yue to group together many different southern tribes with differing languages and customs. Therefore, bear in mind that as we move forward, we are at best describing broad commonalities between a spectrum of peoples with much internal diversity among them. According to the Zhangguo Tse, the ancient Baiyue peoples kept their hair short, tattooed their face and bodies, blackened their teeth, and wore hats made out of fish skin. This is corroborated by Sima Qian, who also described the Yue as short-haired and tattooed, further adding that they wore clothing made out of plant fiber and tree bark, and lived in small communities amidst bamboo groves. These details are likely highlighted to emphasize the Yue's supposed barbarisms compared to the Chinese, who considered their long bound-up hair, unblemished skin, silk robes, and urbanized lifestyle to be the hallmark of civilization. Indeed, later Han sources claimed that the Yue peoples had a language that was like animal shrieking, and bore a culture that lacked all forms of basic morals and modesty. Surviving fragments of Yue religion seem to suggest that they practiced animism. Sima Qian implies that they had prophets that read divinations from chicken bones. Snakes appeared to have some form of spiritual importance. Archaeological records show serpentine patterns appearing on ancient pottery, bronze drums, swords, and tools across ancestral Yue territory. The dragon also appeared to be very important in religious and cultural contexts, and was a sign of power and nobility. One thing common to many of the 100 Yue was seafaring, as the coastal peoples of the south were renowned shipbuilders. Their naval prowess made them the envy of the Chinese kings of the Warring States period. In the Chinese literature of this time, Yue peoples are mentioned whenever the story involves a skillful sailor or cunning swimmer. The southern barbarians were synonymous with the sea. This made the Yue prominent merchants, as their ocean-going vessels established trade networks across much of Southeast Asia, peddling luxury goods. The most notable aspect of Yue culture was their metallurgy. Blades made by Yue smiths were extremely valued in the royal courts of the Chinese Warring States, and were said to be imbued with the talismanic powers of dragons and other mythical aquatic spirits. The most famous of these is the Sword of King Gojin, a 2,500-year-old blade which even today remains remarkably sharp, a testament to Baiyue craftsmanship. Perhaps the most interesting but controversial aspect of the Baiyue peoples are the ancestral ties that they may have had with many modern populations in Southeast Asia. The most prominent of these connections lie in the country of Vietnam. Vietnamese literary tradition asserts that the origin of their nation is somewhat tied to the Yue. A 14th century anthology, the Limnan Chit Kwai, tells the following tale. Sometime around the 3rd millennium BC, there lived a great king known as Lac Long Quan, who descended from a mighty sea dragon. He fell in love with a mystical fairy princess known as Ao Ke, who bore him an egg sac that spawned 100 children. These 100 children became the forebears of the 100 Yue peoples, a branch of which, the aforementioned Luo Yue or Lac Viet, are the ones considered to be the direct ancestors of the Vietnamese people. The word Viet, in fact, is derived from the old Chinese pronunciation of Yue. Vietnam is not the only country with a claim on the Baiyue legacy. Linguistic evidence suggests that some of the ancient Yue had spoken tongues ancestrally related to modern Thai. The strongest testament to this is the presence of the modern Zhuang people. Natives to Guangxi province and speakers of northern Thai languages, they may well be a remnant of a once larger indigenous Thai presence. Linguistic evidence further suggests that archaic versions of Tibeto-Burman and Hmong-Mien languages may also have been spoken among the ancient Yue, which corroborates with the fact that those language families are still spoken by pockets of minority peoples across southern China to this day. Meanwhile, the Yue tribes who lived in modern-day Fujian were most likely speakers of Proto-Austronesian languages. Archaeological evidence suggests that around 4000 BC, they crossed the narrow strait and settled Taiwan, and then migrated out across a huge swath of the Pacific, diverging into the ancestors of the Malay and Indonesian peoples, as well as the voyageuring Polynesians. Therefore, we can look at people as far-flung as the Maori of New Zealand or the natives of Hawaii, and wonder if their seafaring lifestyle and iconic Polynesian tattoos are in some way an echo of ancient ancestors separated by thousands of years and an ocean. As one might have guessed, the latter half of Baiyue history is defined by a centuries-long march of conquest and cultural assimilation that resulted in the overwhelmingly Han Chinese South we know today. This began in earnest with Qin Shi Huang, who engaged in a conquest of ancestral Yue lands on his path to creating what historians consider the first united imperial dynasty of China. The Qin emperor kept order in his realm with an iron fist. To subdue the unruly barbarians, he organized the southwards immigration of 500,000 northern Chinese settlers, many of whom were convicted felons and exiles. However, the Qin dynasty soon buckled under its own tyranny, collapsing immediately after the death of its only emperor. From its ruins emerged the dynamic Han dynasty, which managed to unite most of the Qin's former territory. During this time, the Yue peoples re-established their independence in the form of two states. In modern-day Fujian was the Kingdom of Mingyue, ruled by a royal line descended from the original Yue kingdom. Spanning from Guangdong to central Vietnam was the Kingdom of Nanyue, which was ruled by Zhao Tou, a Chinese general from the Qin dynasty who had styled himself as Emperor of the Southern Yue, and adopted the culture and customs of the locals. Nanyue's cultural legacy is significant due to its control over much of modern-day Vietnam. It is considered by some scholars to be history's first Vietnamese state. Originally, these states were cordial with the Han emperors, but this changed with the ascension of Han Wudi, whose expansionist ambitions saw the Han dynasty absorb them through conquest. Wudi proved to be as despotic to the Yue as Emperor Qin had been. His draconian edict mandated the deportation of the peoples of Mingyue, forcing them from their homes and resettling them between the Changjiang and Huai rivers, leaving their country completely depopulated. Han rule saw an influx of Han Chinese merchants, scholars, bureaucrats, and soldiers into Yue lands, putting increasing pressure on the native peoples to assimilate into the culture of the new elite. That is not to say they accepted their fate meekly. In 43 BC, the legendary Cheng sisters led a fierce uprising that briefly pushed the Chinese out of their homeland of northern Vietnam, but were eventually put down by a Han counteroffensive. The saga of these two female warriors is indicative of one of the main differences between Chinese and Baiyue culture. Where Han China ran on the rigidly patriarchal precepts of Confucian teachings, the peoples they called Southern Barbarians comparatively allowed great freedom to their women, who fought as warriors and leaders. The mighty Han soon fell into decline, and power fell into the hands of local warlords. By 220 AD, the illusion of imperial Han unity had collapsed, and the Middle Kingdom was officially divided into three warring states: Cao Wei, Eastern Wu, and Shu Han. Each state was ruled according to High Chinese culture, but in the southern kingdoms of Wu and Shu Han, there still existed major pockets of Nanman who had not yet assimilated into Chinese society. It is unknown if these indigenous tribes were related to the Baiyue peoples, but it seems likely, as they appeared to have shared some broad cultural affinities. With China now divided, they would rise up again in an attempt to retake control of their homeland. The first of these uprisings came in 221, when the chieftain Shamoka rallied the tribes living in the valley gorges of the Hunan to enter open revolt against the Eastern Wu by joining forces with their main rival, the legendary warlord Liu Bei, and the armies of Shu Han. However, this insurgency was short, for the Shu Han alliance was defeated by Wu forces at the Battle of Xiaoting a year later, and Shamoka was killed in the fighting. The defeat of the Shu Han at Xiaoting made the kingdom look weak in the eyes of the indigenous tribes who lived under their rule. This feeling was exacerbated when the seasoned warlord Liu Bei died and his uninitiated young son ascended to the Shu Han throne. Seeing their opportunity, Nanman tribes in the region of Nanzhong entered into open rebellion. The war that followed is retold in the form of a fantastical legend detailed in the 14th century chronicle Romance of the Three Kingdoms. According to the romance, the Nanzhong Rebellion was spearheaded by a great tribal king known to the Chinese as Meng Huo. Born and raised in the jungle, his men rode war elephants into battle and developed a special armor made of palm wood, which supposedly was able to deflect even the sharpest blades and arrows. Meng Huo had two key allies in his campaign. The first was his wife, the Lady Zhurong, titularly named after the Chinese fire god Zhurong, whom she was descended from. Notably, she is the only woman in the entire Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel who actively fights in battle, perhaps a testament to the aforementioned egalitarian culture of the Baiyue peoples. The second of these allies was King Mulu, the lord of Bana Cave. The romance depicts this man as a wielder of magical powers, claiming that he had control of wild beasts, directing armies of feral tigers upon his foe while he looked on atop his elephant. Initially, the Shu Han kingdom was ill-prepared to deal with the insurgency, but they had better leadership. In the wake of King Liu Bei's death, control of Shu Han had passed down to Zhuge Liang, who served as regent of the realm on behalf of the young king Liu Shan. Liang was without flaws, according to the romance, an incorruptible statesman, benevolent ruler, and cunning general. After putting his affairs in order in his capital of Chengdu, he marched south to put down the rebellion. In the end, the determination of the southern barbarians was no match for Zhuge Liang's cunning. King Mulu scored some initial victories against the Shu Han forces with the aid of his magical beast horde, but lost when his animals were scared away by Zhuge Liang's flame-spewing wooden beasts, which were probably some form of anachronistic gunpowder-based siege weapon. During his retreat, Mulu's elephant threw him off and trampled him to death. Meng Huo, meanwhile, met Zhuge Liang in battle 7 times and was defeated each time. After every loss, the tribal chieftain was captured, only to be treated with kindness and set free. The idea was that by showing mercy, Meng Huo would give up his rebellious aspirations and become loyal to Shu Han once more. Nevertheless, the king of the Nanman was stubborn. Each time he was set loose, he would rally his army and fight Zhuge Liang once more. Only upon the 7th capture did Meng Huo give up his struggle, ending the rebellion. He swore complete loyalty to the Shu Han kingdom. According to the romance, the Nanman peoples never rebelled again. The historical validity of Meng Huo's rebellion is highly questionable. Many scholars rightfully question the fantastical elements of the tale, and point out how absurd it is that the leader of an insurgency could be captured 7 times and be let go each time. Nevertheless, it is one of the last times that Chinese records mention any sort of major uprising amongst the indigenous peoples of the south. By the 7th century AD, it had become predominantly Chinese-speaking, resulting in the modern populations of Fujian, Guangdong, Guangxi, and Yunnan we see today. With that said, not all the descendants of the indigenous South disappeared. Vietnam is home to a vibrant culture whose heritage, in many ways, traces back to the ancient Hundred Yue. The same can be said for many of the modern peoples of Thailand and Myanmar, as well as the Aborigines of Taiwan, who hold out strong in the western mountains of their island to this day. In China itself, echoes of ancient Yue languages can be found in the form of loanwords in modern southern Chinese languages like Hokkien, Hakka, and Cantonese. Furthermore, aspects of their culture lived on long after the peoples themselves faded into memory. As late as 1368, some peoples in Shandong province were recorded to have kept their hair short and tattooed themselves with markings of the dragon and snake. As a result of historical intermixing between Southerners and Chinese, a huge chunk of the modern southern Chinese population has Baiyue blood. Beyond that, minority peoples in China like the Zhuang, Yi, Miao, and Tanka boat people still exist in pockets throughout southern China, with languages, customs, and traditions that stand apart from the modern Han Chinese. These peoples are all likely the descendants of tribes the Imperial Chinese once called Nanman, meaning that while their history has largely been forgotten, their successors live on to this day. More videos on Chinese history are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also support us by buying our merchandise via the link in the description. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.